I'd like to invite Dr. Fatris Bakaram to share his opening remark on his thoughts of the future of religion, belief, and spirituality. Saya bersama, please.
Thank you, Rija. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Dr. Jillian. Friends, I used to use the word brothers and sisters. Okay, am I allowed to use that here today? Okay, thank you. First and foremost, please be aware that I am a kampung boy. Malay language is my language. I made an initial request to Rijal to allow me to speak in Malay, but because of the mixture participants and I was informed also that my Malay friends are about 50% of the whole participants. Am I right? Okay, so I will try to speak in English. Please bear with me. And if there are some terms and words that I suddenly lost and cannot find it, I will ask Rijal to help me with the translation. I'm asked to talk about religion in Singapore. It is my personal observation that religion and faith has evolved a lot. Religion and Islam per se was the spiritual and moral guidance of the whole society before British came. Because basically the indigenous inhabitants of the island were Malays. They were Muslims, all of them. So because of that, Islam was the sole spiritual compass for the whole society and for the whole island. But when British came, people from other parts of the world migrated to Singapore with their respective beliefs, with their respective religions, and suddenly the Malays found that Islam no longer become the penentu, the determinant of the belief, the faith, and even the culture on the island. Now, if we take a look also that maybe Dr. Jillian will be in a better position to provide the social and historical background and explanation to this. But it is my personal view that the Malays were not really ready to face the immediate and sudden economic development of the country. When British turned Singapore to become a trading port, migrants who came to Singapore to find better life, to find pendapatan, incomes, and to find a greener pasture, is it? Pasture in Singapore. The Singapore Malays as inhabitants, they did not have that drive. It was their homeland. It was the place where they have been living for generations. And because of that social and economic background and development, that for me became one of the major factors that caused the Muslims to have difficulties or shortcomings in their economic, political, and social life for about 1.5 centuries until independence. That definitely and naturally as human beings cause a certain degree of pressure, a certain degree of discomfort, of anxiety, of uncertainty to face the future. I think that also is one of the factors why the Malay community, the Muslims themselves, resort to religion to become a pacifier or to provide them with a cushion for them to face that difficulties and that anxiety. That to a certain degree has shaped the religious narration, the religious conversation among Muslims to be talking about, be contented with what God gives you, be patient with whatever difficulties that you are facing, have a spiritual and emotional strength to be able to face that uncertainties, to give priority to the life after world, you know. And if you are feeling the pressure that you are lag behind in many other areas of life, do not despair, because you know there has been this one particular narration that has been popularly or widely narrated to the Malay community for many years and many centuries, and that is to say that "Adunya sijnul mu'min" in Arabic, the world is prison to those who believe. You know? So because of that, they find, okay, if we are not doing well in our economic life, doesn't matter, because this world is not for us. You know, if we lag behind in our social standing, no problem, because we only give priority to the life in paradise, not in this world. That has been the role of religion to help the Malay community and the Muslim community, help them from breaking down because of the numerous aspect of shortcomings and social situation that they were facing. I view that as time goes by, and we are living in a world where there are a lot of challenges, including challenge that has to be faced by religious communities. The Muslims in particular have in the past 40 or 50 years being reminded and being told to be motivated to push forward, to be brave and courageous, to have confidence, to realize that we cannot continue with that attitude, and we cannot continue living as a community that is lagging behind or lagging behind. The religious narration or narratives, the religious conversation in the past maybe 20 or 30 years, if for Muslims, for example, you know, as a Mufti, I'm talking as a Muslim religious person, if you observe the kind of evolution and changes that happen on the pulpits, for example, during Fridays when the imams and the preachers talk about religion during the Friday prayers, you can see there's been a change from only talking about personal ethics, apart from just preserving faith, apart from being just having the moral strength to face challenges. Now we are talking about real issues, about practical issues, about economy, about social illnesses. We talk about challenges faced by families, by parents. We talk about education. We talk even about politics on the pulpit. Why? Because I think the religious narrative has to change, and that is taking place, and that is happening. And we can sense that the Malays and the Muslims are slowly developing a kind of understanding and awareness that although we are living in a secular state and secular society, it would be harmful for the Muslims to separate their faith from their worldly life. There has always been this notion that secularism is opposite of Islam. There's always been notion among Muslims that secularism cannot be accepted within the faith of Islam. But now the reality, as we see, we are living in a secular state within a secular society, and Malays and Muslims are minority. Now, how do we deal with that? How do Muslims, in their effort to preserve their religious identity, how do they address that contradiction between the need to preserve their faith by rejecting secularism, but the reality of life that they are in the middle of a secular state and a secular society? Now, I think the understanding of secularism is against Islam has been misunderstood by the religious community, especially the Muslims. Yes, living in a situation like in Singapore, you cannot demand and you cannot force that your religion, being the policy maker or the determinant of drafting and drawing policies that will affect other communities in Singapore. That cannot be done, because that will disrupt the harmony, the unity of the whole nation. But that doesn't mean that your religion and your faith has nothing to do with the challenges that you face in life. That faith and your religion has to be kept in a very private, individual space in your own self that has nothing to do, or that has not even any effect on the way you conduct yourself socially, economically, in education, in bringing up and developing and building healthy families. Now, in a sense, religion and state must be divided or must be separated. But in another sense, religion cannot be separated from the life of its, if I can say, its subscribers, right? And that is something that we need to develop further. I view that the younger generation, especially Muslims, are looking at religion as something that drives them forward, not as something that only protect and preserve their moral principles, right? And that is very important. We are living in a world where there are pressures for Singapore to be above the others in many aspects, because we don't have natural resources. We are a very small and tiny state. We have to depend on our own selves as human resources. We have to continue to be a nation that have the flame, that have the fire to progress. And I believe that religion can provide that fuel to drive and motivate Singapore Muslims to be contributive, progressive community within Singapore and in the world. If we take a look at the narrative of Islam that is now being presented to the community in Friday sermons, in lectures in the mosque, for example, even activities of the mosque and programs that are being organized. The preachers and the scholars, the imams, now are talking of issues of present problems that I mentioned earlier. Parents are now looking at religion to provide them with guidance, to help them to build individuals, their children, to become contributive members of the society. They are trying to find elements that can motivate them to see that the progress that we are achieving together and we want to achieve further as a nation does not at all contradict with their faith. I can sense that among Muslims, especially the younger ones, I think they are not interested to listen to slogans like, the world is a mere prison for the Muslims, because that doesn't make sense. Now we are looking at the history of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, in a very enlightening manner, and that is really happening, because I compared when I was a teenager, about 30 years ago, trying to recall back the kind of narrative, the kind of lectures, the kind of instructions given by my teachers 30 years ago, very much different from what my colleagues are now presenting in mosque, right? And because of that, I believe we have a younger religious community. When I say younger religious community, I say that 30 years ago, or maybe more than that, longer than that, when we talk about religion, when we talk about places of worship, people perceive that religion is for old people. Religion is something that is needed for retirees to occupy their time. Faith is something that is needed by senior citizens to prepare them for their final day on earth. Places of worship was perceived as a place where only the old people congregate. You know, it's like senior citizen clubs. But now at the present day, not only the mosques, but in my interaction with my colleagues from other faith communities, the Archbishop, with the President of the National Council of Churches, we have regular meetings with the Secretary General of the Buddhist Federation. I was told that all places of worship that belongs to various faiths in Singapore are now having a greater number, and that is very obvious, of younger generation of youth who come to these places to contribute, not only to find solace, not only to find peace, not only to find a place where you will be able to release your pressures and whatever. But I think it is a place where youth come together to work together to contribute to their community and also to the nation. And that is also true to the mosque. And because of that, we see that the mosque understand the need to employ specialized officers to look into the youth development. You know, in Singapore, we now have about 69 mosques, and we are waiting for the 70th mosque to be ready this year. About half of these mosques in Singapore are employing youth development officers. And this is something that you cannot find in any other part of the world. Mosques as institutions employing youth development officers. And it's something where we find visitors who come to Singapore from other parts of the world, from the Middle East, from the region. They came and they were very surprised, the attention that we give to the so-called young religious generation. That's why I say that we are now having a younger religious community. This is a positive development, yes, but there is a challenge. And the challenge is that definitely there will be a contradiction between the aspiration of the younger generation vis-a-vis the tradition that has been the practice of the senior citizens when it comes to faith, religion, and also places of worship. It is my belief that for religion to be continuously relevant, for religion to be able to continue to contribute in developing a progressive community and be a contributive force in building the nation in the next 50 years, opportunity of leadership in religious life, more opportunities of leadership has to be given to the younger generation. Without ignoring and rejecting totally the wisdom of the older generation. Okay? There must be a better balance between the wisdom of the elders and the motivation and the drive that is possessed by the youth. For many generations, when it comes to religion, we only perceive it as, no, this is the territory based on the wisdom of the old generation or the old people, right? We have to move forward, or else the narratives will not change, the role of religion will not develop further, the contribution of religion in providing that motivation to develop further our nation and contribute to the world will not take place. Okay? But how? The issue now is, how would the younger generation try to present themselves as a contributing group to develop the religious life and the faith of the community? Is it useful for the younger generation to be demanding, to just forcefully establish and assert your presence in religious institutions? Or there must be discussions, and in facing different and contradicting values or perceptions or understandings of the faith, of how we regulate and how we organize our religious life, I think this is a challenge that together we must discuss, we must find our way forward. And 50 years down the road, Singapore, I believe and I can foresee, will continue to be a developed world, will be a leader in many issues of the world, but religion will be one of the factors that push Singapore forward. Because religion is a force that demand its penganutnya, congruence, okay, force them to benefit from the world in preparation for their life in paradise. Religion should not continue to be a place where you find tempat melarikan diri, okay, that provide you a door to escape from the challenge of the world, pacifying yourself that we as a religious person or religious people, we only give attention to our life in paradise. That has been the narration. Yes, 1.5 centuries ago or 2 centuries ago, that was needed because of the social pressures that faced by the Muslims and the Malay community, but that cannot continue. There have been signs very promising that we have accepted that as a change, but that has to develop further. I think if I can suggest that in your discussion, in your deliberation, you can find ways of looking at how the next generation of Singaporeans will be able to utilize that as a moral motivator and driver that contributes for Singapore. And thank you very much.